Welcome to the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hello, I'm the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thanks so very much for watching and downloading in more than 150 countries around the world and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. Our guest is a self-described ex-boozer and ex-smoker who now eats clean food, yet still calls herself a dirty girl. She is fascinating, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. With that, we welcome Molly Patrick to the Exam Room for the first time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. That was a very lovely introduction. I'm super excited to talk with you and really happy to be here, Chuck. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled that you're here. You have a fascinating story. But before I just gotta ask you right off the bat, because for those who aren't familiar with you, the title "Clean Food Dirty Girl" is a very interesting one, to say the least. What are the origins of this title, Molly?
It's a great place to start. So let's start with that. This name really, so I started Clean Food Dirty Girl in 2014. This was back when the word like clean food was a really big sort of buzzword, and there's a lot of that going around. And I kind of thought it was a little bit ridiculous myself, the whole like clean food kind of, fad. I've never eaten meat in my life. I was eating a plant-based diet, all of this. But so I really liked that clean food aspect, and then tacking on the dirty girl, it really fit with what I was doing, because what I really wanted to do was help people eat more plants and celebrate imperfection. So I liked the contrast of those two things, the kind of clean food and then the dirty girl part, right? We don't take ourselves too seriously at Clean Food Dirty Girl, and I don't take myself too seriously as a human. The other part was that in 2014, I was kind of a dirty girl. Like, I drank a lot, I smoked a lot, I cursed a lot. I had a sailor's mouth. So that really fit me then. And the other part of that is, growing up, my mom taught me how to cook. She taught me how to garden. I was always in the garden with her, picking tomatoes and planting strawberries. And, she grew a lot of our own food. And so a big part of my childhood was like literally being dirty, like in the dirt with vegetables. And so it was sort of all of these things came together, and I thought of the name and I thought, well, that makes sense. And so that's what I called it. And it really just stuck. And so that was like 10 years ago. So my mouth isn't as sweary as it was before, but it just stuck. So that's a bit of the backstory.
Sweary. I love that. My mouth is not as sweary as it once was. People will be shocked to know that outside of the show, I swear like a sailor. I'm working on that. I really am. Was that a hard habit for you to kick?
I haven't totally kicked it. Like, I think there's something beautiful about a perfectly placed F-bomb, right? Like, I think that there's something so, like, it just doesn't get better than that. So I'll never like drop that completely. I think that what's happened is, in my writing and in my communication with our community, I've practiced so much that I'm able to say now what I want to say without using so many swear words. And I think that I was relying on those in the beginning to fill the pages, to fill the space, because I wasn't a writer. I wasn't, I had never worked online. So I think that and that was really also part of my personality that I put on the page. So I don't think that I quit it. It's just sort of evolved as I've evolved.
That could be a whole other podcast, like the perfectly placed F-bomb,
right?
And the technique behind it. Because I think that, if you allot yourself maybe like one F-bomb a week, it's like you're really going to choose your moment there, right?
I like it.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to work on that. I got goals. For 2025. That's going to be at the top of the list. Let's talk about you a little bit more. So you were talking about your mom and coming up, but I'll tell you what jumped off the page in the bio that you emailed to me was the fact that you grew up on 5 acres of land without any sort of running electricity or water. You say that your parents hand-built your home out of mud, straw, and rocks. You look to be my age or a little bit younger, and I could not possibly fathom growing up in the 80s or 90s and not having electricity or water. That was some kind of experience, was it not?
It was very unconventional. Looking back, of course, I think, wow, that was very different. At the time, I didn't know that it was different at all. I had no idea. I had my closest neighbor, who was also my very best friend. Her parents lived in a school bus when they were building their house. And so it wasn't strange to me at all. I didn't know that it was anything that different in the beginning. But looking back, yes, it was very unconventional and very different from what most children of the 80s were used to. And I didn't really realize just how different it was until I started going over to sleepovers, and I started going, I went to school and then would go over to people's houses. I'm like, a toilet that's indoors. What is this magic? So yeah, it was definitely a rugged beginning for me, for sure. My parents got indoor plumbing, an indoor toilet when I was 17, and I moved out of the house when I was 17. They got an indoor toilet. And I was like, really? You had like, that was just epic timing.
Just in time. I mean, come
Yeah.
on. What was the thought process there? What was driving them to kind of live this kind of counterculture?
Yeah, it really was. My mom grew up, her path was very like, got married early, got pregnant early, um, lived in a white picket fence kind of life, and very traditional for what was happening in the 60s. And it was not for her. And she just sort of up and said, I can't do this anymore. She moved to the mountains. She grew out her armpit hair. She burned her bra. And she was like, I need to be free. And so she was a real hippie, and my dad was as well. He was in the Vietnam War. When he got back from the war, he moved to the mountains of Colorado. He was like, I need to be in the mountains. They met each other and started hitchhiking around the country and lived in like national parks and just like camped for a lot of the year, and finally settled in New Mexico. I had 3 siblings before me. And then they finally settled down on like this 5 acres of just raw land, really off the grid, and decided to build their home there. And then I was born in 1980. And as they were building, we lived in, a teepee. We lived in a tiny little like trailer at one point. We just lived basically outside during that whole process. But, they were hippies. They wanted to live on the land. They wanted to grow their own food. They wanted to live a very different life than the life their parents lived or the life their parents wanted them to live.
Have they written any memoirs? Because I would imagine they would be fascinating.
They are very fascinating people. My mom is a poet. Actually, she does many things, but she's written a lot of poetry, and I'm really wanting her to get some stuff published because she's a great writer and she has so many stories. But as of yet, she hasn't. But she's 81, and she lives a very plant-based lifestyle, and she's doing really well. So she's not slowing down. So it might happen still.
Well, you tell your mom that I would be happy to purchase her first book. I mean, like, I'm ready, and I think that there's a lot of exam roomies who are listening and watching right now, like, man, I gotta get my hands on this. Like, this is epic goodness right there. So you said that you have never eaten meat in your life, and you guys, it sounds like, we're growing a lot of your own food. Um, how did the whole idea of not eating meat pop up onto your parents' radar? Because really, the V word, vegan, didn't take off until the 2000s. So what did they know that virtually nobody else did back then?
Well, my mom, she never liked meat. She never felt like it always made her stomach really upset. She always felt sick after she ate it, but she was really forced to eat it because she was from the generation that, like, if you don't finish your dinner, you stay at the table until you do, right? Her parents were very strict. Her grandpa was a butcher. My grandpa was in the grocery store business. So there was, meat every single meal, and she never wanted it. It was just this thing inside her that she was like, I don't feel right about this. It doesn't make me feel good. And so as soon as she moved out of her parents' house, she stopped eating meat. And this was, in the 60s. So I don't know what that was. I don't know. And it's not like she saw anybody else doing it. It was just this very intuitive thing for her. So I was lucky enough to be raised by her. She didn't eat meat since, way before I was born. And so just by extension, I wasn't brought up with it either.
So yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, somebody who used to eat a lot of it, you're really not missing much, to be perfectly honest with you. That was so actually easy to give up. Like I never really missed meat. You know,
Yeah.
dairy was way harder for me. Did you do any dairy there?
Yeah, sometimes like I was a vegetarian for, I mean when I was little, I never liked milk. My mom would buy milk for my brother because he wanted it, but she would also buy like rice milk. And this was like in the 80s. There weren't the choices there are now, right? There was like the one little teeny health food store that my mom actually helped start that would carry like the one brand of rice milk or something. So I far preferred that. And I was like a very mucusy child and I'm a very like mucusy human. And so anytime I would eat dairy, I just felt like mucusy. It's gross, but it didn't sit right with me. So there wasn't a lot of dairy to give up when I did, but there was like some cream in my coffee sometimes, or the occasional eggs and cheese if I would go out and there wouldn't be anything else. But it wasn't that far of a stretch then to go totally vegan.
All right, so let's talk about what it was that you were eating then. How much of what you were eating was grown off of your land, and how much of it was bought at the grocery store? What were dinners like?
Well, we had a lot of we had like a peach tree and apricot tree, so we had fruit trees. My mom did like tomatoes, zucchinis, cucumbers. She had strawberries. She did squash. She grew a lot of our veggies, lettuce. Like my mom and my best friend's dad in the 80s were growing kale in their garden and making kale smoothies, like in the 80s, you know?
In the 80s.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, and I remember them talking about it, and they're like, "This is so important. Like, this is, these nutrients are so important." And I was like, "Okay," like, but I thought everybody knew about it, right? So a lot of the fruits and veggies she grew, and then we belonged to a cooperative like food co-op that my mom helped start with her friends to get healthy food in the little town where I grew up, and so she would buy a big like a 25-pound bag of rice and a 10-pound bag of black beans and pinto beans and basically just whole plant foods to then put together meals with the veggies that she was growing. So it was basic and it was really healthy, and most importantly for me, like she taught me how to do all of that stuff. Like I was in in our little outside kitchen with her from the time I was little, stirring the rice and cooking the pinto beans and cutting up the potatoes. And so, yeah.
Did you have a specialty at a young age? Did you have a go-to supper?
I mean, rice and beans was like, I remember eating a lot of rice and beans and veggies when I was a kid. Bean burritos. I loved burritos. Here's a funny story. I did not like onions. Like I did not like, I called them onions when I was little. And I would
God
tell my
bless you.
mom, no onions, no onions. And she's like, of course, no onions. Like, I wouldn't do that to you. And so, little, like, and I thought growing up, I would never touch an onion. And so, like, a few years ago, I was talking with her and she finally admitted that she's like, of course, there were onions. I just chopped them very, very small. So you didn't know. Like,
Oh,
what? I was
mom.
duped.
Do you eat onions today? Because my
I
wife and
love
I,
onions.
do you really? Oh man, I just my entire life I've never been an onion guy. Never.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
I
like I
love
think
them.
that
Yeah.
that's why part of why I knew that Julie was the one for me is because like I finally met somebody who dislikes them as much as I do. I don't care if it's a yellow onion. I don't care if it's a red onion. It's just not tasty to me. I don't know
No.
why. I don't know
Have
why.
you tried Maui sweet onions?
I have not. I have
Okay,
not.
that might be the onion that changes your mind. They're sweet, they're light, they're fresh, they're like the best onion. So,
All right, compare the flavor to just say like a regular yellow onion. So sweeter, but does it still have that kind of like pungent oniony taste?
yes, but it's like a little hint of that. It's not like the whole shebang.
Hmm. Okay. Are
Give
they
it a try.
readily available? Like if I go to a grocery store, would I be able to find them, or is this like
Well,
something where I might have to order or go to Maui?
I mean, I live on Maui, so they're all over here. But I
Ah,
think that
right on.
I think like Vidalia onions are also like a sweet onion that might be similar. And I think that
Mm,
they're seasonal. So I think that you
okay.
can get them certain times of year in
All
like
right.
grocery stores on the mainland.
I'll check it out. So here's something for you. So you guys didn't have electricity either. So what was the cooking situation like?
So we eventually got electricity, but so my mom made like an outside um kitchen, and in the beginning it was over fire. Like they had to build a fire to boil water and to like make soup. And then my dad made this like outside kitchen out of like logs, and he covered it with tin. And then eventually they got like a power pole, and they were able to do like an extension cord to the outside kitchen where they had like a little refrigerator eventually. But in the beginning, I mean, they just did stuff that didn't need a refrigeration. I mean, they would just like chop up vegetables and, cook the beans, and we would eat it, and so that we wouldn't have to like refrigerate it. So it was just very, very basic in the very beginning.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. So I guess
Yeah.
like the power pole was a total game changer for you guys. Then
Yes.
that's when I'm assuming the smoothies became a thing.
Right. Yes. Yeah, for sure. That power pole was a very important piece of the puzzle.
Like, did the friends ever come over to your house? Did your friends ever come over to your house like growing up? Because I would think like, yeah, that's like a weird age, and so like even though
Yeah.
it seems normal to somebody who's living in it and it's kind of all they know, like I would imagine, especially as you got like maybe into your early teen years, maybe the
Yeah.
tween years, even you'd be like, I think I'll go stay at Susie's house tonight instead of Susie coming over here.
Yeah. I think the people I invited over were the people who also had very hippie parents. And so they like understood it. But, there were friends that I had that had more like mainstream parents. And when I say mainstream, I mean they just have like a regular house, right? With like an indoor toilet and like hot shower. And I would usually go over to their house because there was a level of embarrassment. Like I don't want them to have to use the outhouse and wonder like why this is so different. But I did have a lot of people over, but these were all people who also had parents who were doing kind of the same thing. It was a weird little town. It attracted a lot of hippies like in the 70s and early 80s.
Yeah, I was just gonna wonder, like, is this like a like kind of a hippie commune or something that was happening?
There were hippie communes like outside of town a little bit, and these I was friends with all of the kids from that kind of commune. But there were also just I don't know, there were people who bought land and kind of wanted to do their own thing, and there were a lot of artists. Yeah, it's one of those, and it's really off the beaten path, so it was really hard to find. You had to kind of know somebody who had been there and knew what was going on. Yeah, it was very unique. New
Yeah,
Mexico is like that. New Mexico is a weird place. There's lots of pockets of very interesting things happening.
right on. Yeah, and I'm totally not judging. I'm just kind of fascinated because it's such a different like experience than what the majority of us grew up with. Certainly, that I don't know that I would be able to handle this. I think that you're probably a much stronger person than I am, Molly.
Well, it did make me resilient in many ways. And in fact, I went really in an opposite direction when I craved living in a big city. I craved like living someplace with skyscrapers and like a really dense population. And so my dream when I left home was to be a fashion photographer. And I wanted to, travel the world and have this very exciting career in fashion photography, which is, completely different from what I'm doing now and very different from how I was raised. But I really wanted the exact opposite of what I grew up with. So I actually pursued that. And then I found that I'm not cut out for the fashion world because I'm way too sensitive. And I don't like, I'm just not cutthroat. And it wasn't, I mean, I learned a lot of great skills and it was very fun, but I just didn't have the personality for it. And then eventually I kind of went back and doing and teaching people how, to eat basically how I grew up eating. So I kind of did follow the same trajectory, but I do live in a normal house.
Right on. I want to talk to you about Clean Food, Dirty Girl, and
Yeah.
and all of the work that you're doing as a health coach now, as you said, like teaching people how to eat how you did, which is way healthier than the
Yeah.
standard American diet. But
Yeah.
I got to go back to that upbringing here. Last question before we move on. You mentioned the outhouse, so like let's just talk about this bathroom situation because this to me seems like this could have been the biggest obstacle of all when living that particular
Yeah.
lifestyle. Not the easiest thing in the world.
No, especially. when it was snowy and cold and wintertime, you know, you had to go to the bathroom, you put on your boots and your jacket and your hat, and it was a bit of a walk from the house. And so it wasn't easy. And a lot of times, it was frustrating. Um, yeah, but that's what it was, right? So it's like, oh, well, you either adapt to it and you make peace with it, or you're just pissed off all the time. So, as I got older, I just kind of accepted it and knew that I would have a regular toilet when I was growing up.
Like, did you ever just get like you just kind of having a lazy day? You open a window, you hang your bum outside, and just do what you got to do. Because like I would
Well,
have done that personally.
when I was little, we lived on 5 acres and it was in the middle of nowhere. And so we have these plants in New Mexico called bear grass plants, and they're these really big, big plants. And so when I was little, I would just go out when I had to pee, I would just go squat behind a bear grass and pee. And like I did so much squatting to pee when I was little, like I can squat now like a champ. Like my legs were so used to that when I was little. I can squat better than anyone else, and I can stay in that position for a really long time.
That's awesome.
Little
That
bonus.
is amazing. Oh man, the skills you never thought we'd develop, man. That is
That's right.
that is epic. That
That's
is
right.
epic. All right, so you move away, and I would imagine that there's a lot of culture shock that comes with that. And what was it like for you though when your whole world kind of changed? And I would imagine like at that point, you're being exposed to all kinds of foods that you probably hadn't been to previously. Did your diet change at all when you turned 17?
It's so funny. So I always told myself, when I leave home, I'm gonna shop at a regular grocery store. I'm gonna buy like whatever I want. I'm gonna buy the sugary Chex and Rice Krispie cereal that my mom would never allow, right? Like I'm just gonna go all out and just buy, whatever the hell I want. And I remember the first time I went grocery shopping. I had my own place. I grew up really fast. I moved out when I was 17, graduated high school early at 17. Um, I remember being in the grocery store and being like, okay, I can buy anything. And you know what? All of a sudden I was like, I don't want to. And I was like, oh, I can buy meat if I want to. Not that I ever even wanted meat. Um, but I ended up buying the same stuff that my mom taught me how to cook. And so I was like, oh, actually, I don't really want this stuff. Right. So that was an interesting kind of transition. But then, eventually when I went away to college, I didn't have a lot of money. So there was a lot of like ramen noodles and like Taco Bell and stuff like that. Then as I got a little bit, progressed, got a little bit older, there was a lot of like vegan junk food and stuff like that. But I always kind of found my way with healthy eating, and there was always those staples that I grew up with: the rice and beans, the kale, the fruit, the veggies. I mean, that was always a big part of my diet, even though when I was out in the wild and could buy whatever, I tended to stick to those healthy things, at least, for the most part.
Did your taste buds prefer the healthier things even when you didn't have a whole lot of money and you were going to a place like Taco Bell who invests thousands, if not millions of dollars in perfecting their recipes with just the right amount of salt and other processed ingredients?
I mean, yeah, it was divine, right? You bite into that and you're just the whole pleasure center just is like ding, 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 it explodes. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that was amazing. And I really did. I mean, I think that anybody who eats that kind of food, it's like it tends to hook you a little bit and you kind of want more of it. But food wasn't my big thing. I mean, my big thing was alcohol and smoking cigarettes. That was my big thing. So food was just sort of like I ate it because I had to type of
Mm.
thing. So like whatever did the job during the times when I really had no money, I was like, piece together, whatever.
Oh man, like I'm the kind of guy that if it gives my brain any kind of happiness, I'm gonna do it again and again and again. So like
Mhm.
I was binging on Taco Bell and none of this healthy plant-based stuff, or I'm going to put healthy in quotes there, healthier plant-based stuff that they have now. And I was smoking like a pack and a half, 2 packs a day. Like I just, if I got any sort of pleasure kick from it, like I loved it. How much were you smoking? Were you a pack and a half or a 2 packer?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I started smoking when I was actually like a teenager. And I mean, for sure a pack a day and much more than when I was drinking. So if I was drinking, I could smoke I could smoke 3 packs in a day when,
Ooh.
during when I like the regular time during the day and then drinking all night with my friends. I mean, I could put them away. It was really bad. I was going to say, I remember just to hit on the food part one more time. I remember in college. So what I would do is I would buy like the ramen noodles, and then I had like a little hot plate in my dorm, and I would go to Jack in the Box and get their free, like they had free ranch dressing at the time in these little packets. And my mom would send me little care packages, and she would put like nutritional yeast and like spices and like stuff like that. And then I would go to the grocery store and buy like some kind of greens. And when I would make my ramen, I would make them with I would just take the noodles, and then I would mix in some greens and then put nutritional yeast on top, and then put some of that like Jack in the Box ranch. So I remember like I was already kind of adapting recipes even like my first year in college. So that was just like a memory that came up, which was funny. But the smoking thing, yeah, I loved smoking. Smoking to me was so much fun. I just loved doing it. And then paired with drinking or paired with coffee, didn't get better.
That first cup of coffee and first cigarette
Mm-hmm.
of the day was just that
Oh,
was like epic bliss point. Epic
totally.
bliss point.
Heaven.
How did you find your way back to health there? Because I mean,
Yeah.
you can eat all the greens in the world, but if you're drinking like a fish and smoking like a chimney, that's not doing you many favors there.
Yeah. Well, I think, I really did in my brain. I was like, okay, well, I'm doing all this unhealthy stuff, but I'm also like drinking green smoothies, right, every day. And I'm also eating a plant-based diet. And so I really kind of justified my unhealthy behavior for my healthy behavior. And I really was like, well, it's about balance, right? So I never fully left the healthy habits, right? I think that they were just really overshadowed by the unhealthy habits. When I was 35, I just reached the point where I was like, I can't keep doing this, because if I keep doing this, like I am not going to be around for a long time. Like I just had this feeling like I just can't do it, but I was in it so deep. I was so addicted to alcohol. I was so addicted to cigarettes. And I had tried to quit a couple times in the past, and it just didn't really work. And I woke up one morning and I was like, this has to be it, or else this is going to be my life and I have to accept that. And I don't
Hmm.
really want to accept that this is my life because I feel like crap.
Yeah. So what did you do? Because I mean, you can hit that rock bottom and you can get going, but there are going to be days when temptation is really tugging on your shoulder. So how'd you overcome?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I just so I had a chair in my house, and it was this big comfy chair, and I called it my embrace the suck chair. And anytime I would have a craving, anytime I would start to feel that like itch, that pull, that draw, just really uncomfortable, either physically in the beginning or emotionally, I would go sit in that chair, and I would just make myself sit in the chair and just sit there until the worst of that craving passed. And then I would get up and I would continue on with my day. And when it would happen again, I would go back to the chair and sit down in that chair and just allow myself to feel whatever it was what I was feeling, because that was the problem, right? I wasn't allowing myself to feel all of the feelings for years and years and years of my life. So I, I and I don't know how I came up with that. Like it was just a thing that it was my intuition that was guiding me to do that. And it really helped because it gave me some action thing to actually do. Oh, I want to drink. Oh, I want to smoke. Oh, I'm feeling like crap. Okay, I get to do something. I don't get to smoke. I don't get to drink. Um, but I do get to go sit in that chair and just process whatever it is that I'm processing. And then, because it comes in waves, right? And it gets really bad and then it'll kind of go down a little bit. So that's how I did it in the beginning.
I love that. You are the first person that I've ever heard of that uses that same kind of phrase. I call it accept the suck. People always
Mm-hmm.
ask me about, how do you overcome cravings? And I talk about accepting the suck for the time when your life sucks because those cravings are hitting so hard and you want nothing more than to give in. And you
Yeah.
just sit with yourself and you accept the fact that you're uncomfortable, you're miserable right now, but for whatever reason, it seems to take the edge off just enough so you don't throw in the towel and give in and pick up whatever vice that may be. And
Yeah.
you did something exceptionally similar. And I love that about you. Like, that
Mhm.
is amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that the accepting part was you hit it, right? It's that it's the not running from it. Because when you're trying to push those things away, like it is worse, right? It does get worse. It does feel worse. But when you can embrace the suck or accept the suck, it makes it feel just okay enough, like you said, to just sit there and experience it. And we don't like to experience things that make us feel bad. Like, why would we? Like, we're not wired to. So it's a very knee jerk response to just go towards the thing that we're really wanting. But if we can just sit there and allow it to be what it is and allow it for it to just be horrible for a minute, or 10 minutes or whatever you need, then yeah. And I've really applied that to many things in my life too. I mean, that was a skill. And I think it's a skill that you have to practice, wouldn't you say? Like it's a practice that you have to
Absolutely.
do. Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to practice it because it's going to keep coming up. So you're
it
going to have
will.
plenty of times to practice
Yeah.
as well. So, how did all of this become kind of full circle for you with Clean Food, Dirty Girl? When did you decide to really become a life coach and start helping others?
Well, so I worked in, after the photography portion of my life kind of came to a an ending, a closing. I had always worked in restaurants, and I had always, waited tables or bus tables or did whatever while I was putting myself through college. But I actually got back into the restaurant business, but I helped open plant-based restaurants in different states. And so I was doing that. And I was working for someone who was a plant-based oncologist, and he wanted to, he wanted more healthy options available for people. So I teamed up with him and started working with him. And it was really great work. And the thing that, I mean, it was really hard work because the restaurant business is really, really, it's a tough industry. It's a tough job. But the thing that I loved about that job was talking to people who would come in looking for that healthy food, and hearing their stories, right? Hearing that they used to have type 2 diabetes and they no longer do, and they essentially reversed their type 2 diabetes with what they were eating, or they used to be really addicted to food, and eating the standard American diet, and now they're running marathons and living their best life. So I would hear all of these amazing stories from these people, and these people were so happy to have a healthy option in their area. And I was really drawn to that. And I loved, having this healthy food available for people. So I knew I wanted to do something with that. But I knew I didn't want to work in the restaurant business forever because it was just brutal and so many hours and just hard. Um, and so I eventually decided, okay, well, I want to do something online, but I want to help people eat more plants. But keep in mind, as this was happening, I was, smoking, I was drinking. I was very functional, right? I was good at my job. I even went to the gym. I rode my bike a lot. Like I was very functioning. But I still had these habits that were not healthy and that were not helping. But even though I had that, right, I knew what I wanted to do. And so eventually the restaurant portion of my life kind of wrapped up, and I started an online I started to have an online presence, and I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning because I had always, I never worked online. I didn't know anything about online marketing or online content or creating a community. But I was like, well, whatever, I'll figure it out. And coming back to my upbringing, that was so important because it made me really resilient, and it made me really creative, and it made me have this attitude of like, well, whatever it is, I'll just figure it out. If other people are doing it, I can do it too. And so that's what I did. I just dove all in. I didn't really have a plan B. I started writing these sweary Saturday emails. And so I've been writing those actually since like January 2014. I've put out a sweary Saturday email every single Saturday since then. So I just slowly started growing it. But in the beginning, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I just wanted to help people eat more plants. And eventually, now 10 years later, it's become Clean Food Dirty Girl. It's become this amazing, community and resource for people.
I would imagine that your time working in the fashion photography industry, tough though it may be, actually kind of had some benefit for you when it came to content creation, right? I would imagine some of those skills were able to carry over.
Yes, yeah, because in the beginning, I mean, anybody who starts any kind of business, and in this case, an online business, in the beginning, you're wearing every single hat, right? You're doing every single thing. And because I had, photography skills and lighting skills and going to school for photography, I knew how to take food photos. So that really came in handy. And also having a tough skin, right? Because when you put yourself online and you start sharing stuff, especially the stuff I was sharing, because I was very transparent about my life, and it really helped me kind of get that tough skin and be able to take, feedback that maybe wasn't so nice. And then, yeah, the actual photography part. Now I don't have to do everything because we have an amazing team and we have an amazing food photographer, and we have an amazing recipe developer. And so we've been able to expand so that I no longer have to wear every single hat. But sure, in the beginning, like every experience that I had leading up to that point, like it was almost like it all supported me in what I was going to do next.
So let's talk about this program that you've developed for the Plant Fueled Life, which, by the
Yeah.
way, I should mention that you have been so generous. You've set up an exclusive offer for exam roomies. Get 50% off your first month of Plant Fueled Life. All you need to do is head over to cleanfooddirtygirl.com/exam room. And we've got that link down below in the description and in the episode notes for you. So let's talk about that program and what it looks like. Can you walk our listeners and viewers through that?
Yeah, sure. So can I just tell you a little story about how that came to be? Do you mind?
Absolutely. I love me some
Okay.
stories. Tell them.
I have so many stories. So,
Tell them
like,
all.
I knew a couple of things. Like, I knew that I wanted to. I've been, making plant-based recipes taste good. Like, that's something that I've been doing for a really long time. Um, and one of the things that I used to love doing, and I still love doing, is presenting food to people who aren't necessarily plant-based, but presenting plant-based, healthy plant-based food for them, and watching their reaction, and getting this reaction like, wow, what is this? Like, I thought I didn't like onions, for example, or I thought I didn't like kale, or I thought, and wow, this is amazing. So I always love doing that. And at the same time, so I started Clean Food Dirty Girl in 2014. I quit drinking and smoking in 2015. And that's when really everything sort of took off for me because I stopped getting in my own way. And so I was eating really healthy. I was eating a whole food plant-based diet. I was really like planning out my meals and making sure I was very focused on self-care because I had a lot to repair from all of those years of kind of not being so nice to myself. So it was something that I was doing personally. And so this Plant Fueled Life really happened organically because what happened is people would ask, like, well, what are you eating? And I was like, oh, well, I can and I'm a big fan of batch cooking. I've done batch cooking for a really long time. I'm a firm believer in like making your own convenience food. And that's really what you're doing when you're batch cooking, right? You're making your own convenience food so that you can open up the fridge and like magic food is there. It's faster than going to the drive-through. So this is what I was doing. And so I was like, oh, well, I can just share the plan that I'm doing this week. I'll just share like my personal grocery list with people and just share the recipes that I'm making and how I'm putting those into meals. Because I was writing that stuff down anyway. And so people loved it. They're like, oh, we want more of this. So that's sort of how it was born. And it started Plant Fueled Life. Now it's been 8 years since
Wow.
we've been offering that. So yeah, that's sort of how it started. And it's turned into, it was just me for a long time doing all of the meal plans, all of the recipes, and everything in the business really. But I was able to hire some really amazing recipe developers. So me and my team have actually created this database that's beautiful. And we had developers actually create like this whole system for our members. It's really cool. There's a lot of functionality. You can select your portion sizes, and it automatically calculates your grocery list and your batching items. But our database has like over 4,000 whole food plant-based recipes, over 350 whole food plant-based meal plans, and we just keep like adding stuff to it. You can make your own meal plan if you want from all of our recipes. But it's this really awesome tool to help people eat more plants. And so it's turned into this beautiful thing that people just love.
That's awesome. I love the fact that you're talking about convenience food, but you're making it so convenient to
Yeah.
learn how to cook and eat this way. Like that, that's really amazing. And that is honestly, Molly, one of the things that we get asked so much about here on the show, and the experts who come on is like, well, what are these easy to make convenience foods that we can always all have on hand? Because that's such a big part of our on the go kind of culture these days. What are some easy go to ideas that you might suggest?
Well, just like in my childhood, like my mom knew something back in the 80s, right? Like, I mean, a lot of it is, so if you spend a couple of hours in your kitchen once a week and you make, a batch of grains, you make a batch of soup, you make some beans, you make a dressing, and you make a sauce. You have your one thing that I always do is when I get home from the farmer's market, I wash all of my produce and then I put it in the fridge so that it's ready to go. If you do that, there's like endless combinations of things that you can pull from. Now we actually like do the planning for you, right? We have all of these meal plans that you just literally follow along with. But that's what it is. It's taking these basic component recipes, like maybe some walnut parm and some marinara sauce, and maybe you're cooking your pasta on your batching day and then putting that in the fridge, right? So that when you are like, oh, I'm hungry, you just heat up that pasta, put some kale on top, put some marinara sauce, put some walnut parm, and you have this like gourmet, delicious meal under 10 minutes. That it really is the convenience food that you put together, so you know exactly what's going into it, and you don't have to, scramble to get something healthy. Because if you're really hungry and you don't have any food, like you will eat something that's not as healthy as what you could make. And for most people, they're not going to make, entire elaborate meals from scratch every time they're hungry. So it's just doing those components ahead of time, whether that's, grains, beans, pasta, potatoes, and some sauces to accompany them.
What about snacks? Snacks are a big thing too. Like if it do in the plant fueled life program, do you guys
Yeah.
have snack ideas on there? Snacks are
Oh,
crucial
yeah.
now. Snacks are
Yeah.
crucial.
So we have this filter, and you can actually search by whatever type of meal you're looking for: breakfast, lunch, dinner, quickie meals, snacks, desserts. And so, yeah, we're big on snacks. We have a ton of snack recipes. And then don't forget, fruit is like one of the best, healthiest, quickest snacks you can have. But also, you could, fancy it up a little bit and do a piece of like, toast with a little bit of like tahini with some bananas and maybe a little sunflower seeds on top or something. You can get fancy with it. But, there's the great thing about plant-based eating, as you know, Chuck, is the amounts of foods that are available to us to eat. It's like, it's such an abundant way to eat that there's just endless possibilities.
Absolutely, man. You bring that up,
Yeah.
and it's just like one of my favorite easy go to snacks is just like toast with a little bit of nut butter and some sliced banana on top. And it is one of the easiest things in the world to put together. It is impossible to mess up unless you burn the toast, and it is delicious. Like
Yeah.
you're talking about, just a couple of minutes. Like it's so easy. I want to end with this, Molly. This really stood out to me when I was looking on your website. One of the things that you talk about is the beauty of imperfection.
Hmm.
And what does that exactly mean to you? What is the beauty of imperfection?
Yeah. It is allowing yourself to be human and knowing that because we are human, by definition, we are not perfect. We are not perfect. And so when people go into, I mean, we're talking about plant-based eating, but really anything, and they have this idea of getting it perfect, right? They are setting themselves up for failure, in my opinion. I've seen it happen so often. And they think, okay, well, I'm gonna eat whole food plant-based and I'm gonna go do it 100%. And what I've seen time and time again over the years is, okay, but then there's like a birthday party or there's a wedding or there's an event and somebody doesn't eat whole food plant-based. They're like, okay, well, I'm just going to have this one meal. And if that person is striving for perfection, then they are going to be really disappointed in themselves because they weren't quote unquote perfect. And that can lead, and I've seen it happen, lead to this downward spiral of like 2 years later, they're like, wait, I think I used to eat plant-based. I think I was feeling pretty good. I should get back to that. And so when you come to the table, literally, and think, okay, I am going to allow myself to be this messy, complicated human. And sometimes like I'm going to eat as plant-based as I can, but once in a while, like, I might have something that's not plant-based, and that's going to be okay. That gives you like, it gives us permission. It gives us the grace to kind of allow that to happen and not, say screw it and throw in the towel. So in regards to plant-based eating, that's sort of what it means. And I think in general, I think just remembering that none of us are perfect, no matter how perfect the Instagram feed or the social media feed is. None of us are perfect. We're all beautifully flawed, imperfect humans, like every single one of us. So I think it's just important to remind people of that.
All right. Prefaced by saying I agree with you 100%. But I think that there's a flip side to that as well, where maybe we give ourselves too much grace. I'm a big believer in you have to always try to do your best. But it's really easy to tell yourself that you're doing your best despite the fact that you're really eating burgers and fries every day.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
not going to do you any favors to get your weight loss goals. Or maybe it's pizza, or maybe you struggle with Taco Bell like I did, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
It's really easy to say that you're doing your best when the reality is you're really far from it. So how much grace does one give themselves? How do we know if we are actually doing our best and still allotting for that occasional slip up? Because you know what I mean? Like, that's a slippery slope.
Yeah. I think that a really important piece of that is being very honest with yourself. And I think allowing yourself to call yourself out. Like, okay, are you really doing your best? Or are you using that as an excuse to just shovel all this food in your face that isn't helping, right? And is not going to help your long-term goals. But really being brave enough and, to be honest with yourself, to assess what you're doing. Because we know, you can say, okay, well, yes, I'm imperfect, so I'm going to be eating at Taco Bell every single night. Is that true? Or does Taco Bell have a really big, really grip on you and you are fully addicted to that, right? So I think it takes self-reflection, it takes self-awareness, and it takes really being honest about what that means to you. So I think that's a good place to start.
That is a really good answer, and it is clear that you have worked with a lot of people who have wrestled to try to answer that for themselves. The website is cleanfooddirtygirl.com. The program is PlantFueled Life, and you can get 50% off right now your first month at cleanfooddirtygirl.com/exam room. Again, a link is down below. Molly Patrick, you are amazing. Please tell your mom to write the memoirs, and if you ever decide to write a memoir, I would love to read that as well. You are a fascinating soul who is doing a ton of good in the world, and I thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today.
Thank you, Chuck. It's been my pleasure to speak with you. And shout out to all of the dirties listening. I love you all. And I know that there's a lot of, we call each other dirties in our community. There's a lot of them who are obsessed with this podcast, and they're going to be really excited to hear me on this. So shout out to all the dirties listening.
The dirties are welcome. The dirties and the roomies are not mutually exclusive. We should have a big get together. We'll just have the meeting of the roomies and the dirties and yeah, whatever. It'll be a whole lot of fun. Anyway, Molly Patrick, you're awesome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it.